Welcome, listeners, to today's podcast of Mind, Money, Emotion. We have a special guest today that is going to be sharing with us something that all of us should have, if we don't have, near and dear to our heart, and that is the topic of self-talk. I have Dr. Bob Ruotolo with me today. Thank you so much for spending some time with me, Bob.
Well, Marie, I'm just so happy to be here with your audience.
You know, you have some really interesting background that I feel, as I look at the history of it, I'll just share some of it with your listeners, and then you can certainly fill it out a little bit more. But I think it's brought you to exactly where you are today with your whole focus on health and wellness, and really discovering that your purpose is truly to help others be successful, and then through their success is how you're deriving your success. And so much of it is tied to this topic of self-talk and the power of self-talk. So before I ask you to share with us a little bit of that evolution, I'll just share with our listeners that you actually started in your career in family and marriage counseling. And boy, we're talking about relationships, right? Whether it's with others or ourselves, that's like the base for everyone, family and marriage counseling. And then you kind of evolved to be more interested and trained in organizational behavior. Actually worked for Imperial Oil in Toronto as the Director of Organizational Development. Went on to be the VP of Operations for GAR Properties, which is a family-owned company. Also joined Allied Signal in Toronto, and then kind of changed career with all of your experience to be more of a speaker, writer, consultant. You've authored 2 books, if I understand correctly, and working on a 3rd one. And that's how you got to where you are with us today, where you founded Quantum Performance Institute back in the late 90s, as well as a nonprofit. I'm curious to learn more about that as well. So I'm excited that you have evolved into the health and wellness side, because that's really where my background as a registered dietitian, helping folks with diet and exercise, and now on the financial side, helping them balance their finances as a certified financial planner. It really is all very interrelated. So I'm curious where you saw that power of self-talk in your various capacities that really has brought you to focusing quite a bit on that today.
Well, thank you, Marie, and thank you for kind of giving that evolution of my background. And self-talk really goes back to my early roots, in the sense that many of us wonder who we are, what we're all about, and where we're going on in this life. And so I, with my interest in psychology as a young person, asked those questions: who am I, and why am I here? And so that led me on my path to get more involved in beginning to help others to understand themselves, and actually through that learning more about myself and through those studies. And I did get involved early on in my graduate experience, first level graduate studies in individual family and marriage counseling, and found that very extremely interesting and exciting to help others to work through relationships. However, I found it very taxing at times, in the sense that when you're in that kind of giving role, and I'm thinking very much today in the world, we hear about people in healthcare who are through the pandemic and through what they've experienced, the weight that they carry on their shoulders. People who are in the helping professions, counseling, what have you, especially when they're younger and they don't know how to manage that pressure and disassociate from it, it takes its personal toll. And so I eventually moved out of that, but still was very, very interested in organizational behavior and in psychology. And then I pursued my studies and wound up in the field of organization development and helping organizations to be more successful. En route to that, I actually, I have a very strong background in athletics. I played university football, and I was always involved in athletics, and found there in athletics the importance of mental conditioning. And in the end, the combination of my studies and being interested in athletics, I began to work, as I was working in my own professional field in industry, I also began to work with athletes in competitive swimming. I had a daughter who was a competitive swimmer, and I worked with her coaches and I worked with the swimmers. And that's when I really honed into the power of mental conditioning and the power of really the topic today, self-talk. And as I studied that more and more, I recognized the voices that are in our heads all the time, 24/7. Every time when you wake up in the morning till you go to bed at night. And then through the advent of and development of positive psychology became to more understanding the attitude formation and how our attitudes affect how we perceive the world around us, relationships, ourselves, and others. And that continues to influence our self-talk. And so I've been a student of this for a long time. And in my first book, Inspiration at Work, I began to use my understanding of mental conditioning, both on an individual level and also in teams and organizations. And that has to do with culture formation, on how organizations begin to respond to each other, see their environment. They too form a culture. And that self-speak goes on in an organization. If you actually walk the halls of an organization and listen to the leadership and listen to the people there, you learn a lot about how they think about themselves, each other, their clients, their customers, their vendors. And you can see whether or not it goes on the positive or on the negative.
I can
I
see
remember
how.
years ago,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember years ago when my wife began to work. She also is a social worker by profession, left social work and went to work for Southwest Airlines. And
Oh,
Herb Kelleher was at the helm at that time. And Herb's philosophy was hire a person with a positive attitude and we'll train them in anything we need to do in the skill area. But if you don't have that base attitude, you really can't build it very easily with people. So you were going to say something, Maurice. Let me just stop for a moment.
well, as you're explaining all of this, it sounds like, when you think of the environment in a work setting, for example, it's a combination of all of the pieces, of all of the individual people and their love of themselves and of their relationships. But if we go back to, you said at the very beginning, it's so much about understanding ourselves. And we can't be in the best relationship until we are the best with ourselves to begin with. When you and I first met, it was in that positive intelligence course that we took, which was a fascinating topic for me to really understand the way that the brain works and then how to leverage that. But you have to intentionally leverage the focus on looking for the positive. And then the whole mental conditioning came into that. So if you can talk a little bit about the positive side of things and how you have seen incorporating that into self-talk is really making a difference for folks individually.
Absolutely. What really brought me to positive intelligence and the experience we had was the understanding of the neuroscience that substantiates what's happening in the brain today. I knew through my psychology and through other work I actually did the power of positive negative thinking. I didn't understand how we are really designed anatomically with the right brain and left brain and different parts of our brain that affects our functioning. And what's wonderful about that is that as you understand and know that, and now we have the constructs that positive intelligence brings us. It actually brings us the constructs so we can label the negative side and the positive side, the saboteurs and the sage, and understand these are distinctly different domains and they affect how we function. So once you have that understanding and recognize that there is a physiology and a chemistry and a psychology all working together, that once we harness that, understand the power of it, how it affects behavior, how it affects how I think about myself, how I think about others, how I think about the situation, and how I can use my positive energy to be able to move in the direction that I choose to move in. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. So
it truly is powerful. And yet I think one of the biggest revelations for me in reading the book, Positive Intelligence, and then the site allowing you to take that quick little 2-minute assessment to see what is your positive quotient, positive intelligence quotient. Are you, the goal, right, is to try to get 75% of your self-talk to be positive versus negative. And it's very eye-opening, but it has to be a conscious effort to make those habits. So maybe you have an activity or some things that you found that are helpful for people to really look at. Where am I and what can I do to change?
very much so. That's the first thing we need to do, as you said, self-awareness and self-assessment. And that's why I sent to you that little tool I have with regards to taking some time to reflect on what is happening in our mind, the thoughts that we have. And I said you can kind of use it as a teeter-totter, in the sense that, when do I have more negative thoughts or more positive thoughts? And are they about myself and about others and about the situation? So those are the domains and dimensions that we want to look at. And it gets back to understanding the power of negative thought, because it's like a 3-to-1 ratio, is that you need to have 3 positive to outweigh 1 negative. And that has to do with early conditioning. We have been early conditioned to protect ourselves, and one way to protect ourselves is really by and we're fear-driven. When you're young and not in control of yourself, you are driven primarily by fear, and that's why strong parents and our teaching and our educational institutions and our churches and our community. And then don't do that. Don't do this. This is wrong. So we focus on protecting ourselves, but yet it's giving messages in our mind. Don't. And instead of focusing on what we ought to do, our church has done a great job. This whole thing about sin, imperfection, okay? And not recognizing that the good life, in other words, because we had this, I don't know, it gets into a whole different topic we'll love to talk about sometime. However, it did not recognize that really the good life brings happiness, positive energy. And what is that? So now with this construct that we have with positive intelligence, we have the sage powers. It literally talks about the power we have in ourselves with regards to, and one thing which I think is so important is self-empathy. And not only empathy for others, but caring and loving ourselves. Self-love in a very positive way, in a sense that we are beautifully designed and divine creatures when you think of it, what we have and how we get through this life and all the things that we've been able to work together to co-create. So anyway, Marie, I have spent a lifetime developing a system, and I call it Beyond Leadership to Transformation on an individual level, team level, organizational level. And this construct of positive intelligence is so much part of that. It's almost a prerequisite. If I love working out in the gym, working out physically, because and at this stage of my life, it's so critical. And by working out physically, it pumps that wonderful blood through my brain so I can think better and clearer. And so I'm very much holistic, eat well, exercise well, be around positive people. So, and you introduced me as one who helps people to be successful. And as they drive success in their lives and in their work life and their personal life, and I can help them do that, then I really, really enjoy myself. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of being able to help others. And through helping others, I derive that positive well-being myself. So anyway.
One thing that I found very helpful in reading about positive intelligence is, and it's a lot of brain science, right? It's the fact that there's this survive brain that's just so used to fear feel, react,
Mhm.
feel, react, feel, react, because it was in protection mode, you know, they way back in the caveman days. And then there's a thrive side of the brain. So you have a negative focused side and a very positive focused side. So what do you find helps people get out of the survive side and into the thrive side so that we can improve that positive intelligence practice that we need practice, that mental conditioning, that practice part?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is really to recognize there is a difference and that we have to be able to be in self-control and self-command. And we need to be able to interrupt the negative thoughts. So again, going back to the constructs we learned in positive intelligence is that we really, the interceptors are so important. First thing is recognition of the thoughts that we have. And again, these are habits of thought, and especially in certain relationships we have. Sometimes they're almost like, oh my goodness, I've been thinking that way about that relationship so long, I get caught into it, I get trapped into it. So to be able to have that interceptor, and we know that we have, those PQ reps where you intercept by really interrupting by tactile or other ways, or watching on your breathing, by being able to intercept. Now, once you intercept, you can get into self-command. And self-command is calling in the sage powers. In other words, going right to the positive side and starting with compassion, with self-empathy, saying, listen, stop beating myself up, stop beating that other person up, and stop getting so down on a situation. And then we said, okay, now what sage do I go for? Do I explore and start looking about where do we go? Do I start innovating? Do I start? So it's really working those 5 sage powers and understanding that there are different parts of our cognitive thinking that we're designed to do that. So we're already designed for success. And we need to be able to do is develop the habit. And that's what conditioning is all about. Again, we talk about having to be able to do these exercises every day. I go to the gym 5 days or 6 days a week and do some kind of physical exercise. Well, why don't I do mental exercises? Why don't I really practice? And we need to. It's actually called mental muscle. And it takes time to be able to create that. So I think the awareness, then getting into a program like Positive Intelligence, some of the work that I do with folks around self-talk and understanding that, some of the exercises we do, and filling our lives up with a sense of positivity, who we hang around with, the language we choose to use. I'm very much convinced that if we understand what our core values and beliefs are, begin to start modifying those more towards the sage side of what the world's all about, we can be in command and we can work collaboratively with others more effectively because we can think of them in a positive way rather than looking at the negativity or the negative competitiveness that we have going on between us and other individuals.
Right.
It's fun. It really is.
I think it's like any change, we need to get to the point where we're motivated enough or in enough pain that we say, that's it, I need to do something different. So that's where I find that quick little 2-minute assessment on positiveintelligence.com or reading the book, or your exercise where you have people, I always envision the little angel and devil on your shoulder. It's like the positive and the negative. And in your exercise, you're saying, pay attention for 20 minutes, all the thoughts, and write them down. Was that positive? Was it negative? And we're probably going to be shocked with the negativity that's just happening all the time, right?
That's right. And once you recognize that, Marie, then you can start really looking at, how do I begin to start thinking more positively? And that's really it. So, and how do I start conditioning myself with everything around my life around that kind of positive posturing towards myself, others, and the situation?
Right. So the awareness and the motivation to get started, and then learning the tools of pausing or forcing yourself to be interrupted to really think about choosing a positive path. So I know you offer different coaching opportunities on a regular basis. It sounds like monthly. And
Yes.
so I think it might help our listeners definitely to know more about that and how to reach you if they do want to connect with you on how you're helping people with self-talk, positive self-talk and other.
Absolutely. Well, I have two websites that I would love to have them go to and just browse. The website, which is quantumperformance.net, quantumperformance.net. That website has a lot of videos on it, has a lot about the kind of work that we do as an organization and the kind of services that we offer. I particularly enjoy working with people who are interested in coaching, life coaching, career coaching, leadership coaching, because the system that I created with others is a great foundation for that. And then we have a site which has many of our learning programs on that they can look at, and that's blt-systems.com, blt-system.com. So I'd love to, and then I'm an email away, Dr. Bob at quantumperformance.net, drbob at quantumperformance.net. I'd love to hear from your audience and have a dialogue and just share with them. So
wonderful. And we'll have all of that in the show notes, as well as the exercise, that positive, negative self-talk kind of tracking exercise that I think is really a good starting point for everybody to maybe get a better feel of where they are. And hopefully that's the motivation to take
awesome.
The next step.
Okay.
Well, thank you,
Dr. Marie. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's my pleasure to have you. I think you're helping people on something that's really the base of so many challenges we face in life, and that's truly the positive self-talk and the damage that the negative can do. So thank you for that, and keep on doing what you're doing.